Welcome back to the show, everyone. This is the Voices of Healing podcast. I'm your host, Tina Clark. If you're listening right now on Spotify or YouTube or your favorite platform, please remember to like and follow and subscribe if you're enjoying this podcast. Today's guest is Ellen Busch. She's the author of Disempowered, and she was able to overcome dyslexia, along with a lot of other challenges in her life. And she's here to tell us her story. So, welcome to the show, Ellen.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on as a guest.
So, tell the audience a little bit more about yourself and your background.
Sure. So, at a very young age, around 6 or 7, I was diagnosed as dyslexic. And unfortunately, the bias and the belief system at the time caused the education system to just write me off. In fact, my parents were told in a parent-teacher conference that I would not be going to college. I might finish high school, and they should focus on finding a husband who would take care of me because I was not going to contribute to society.
Wow.
Yeah, pretty rough. They neglected to take into account my WIS test scores, and I scored, an IQ test 115. I scored in abstract reasoning in the 99th percentile, and logic in the 98th percentile. So it wasn't an intelligence issue, it's just a learning difference. And unfortunately, that wasn't understood at the time. Going through elementary school was traumatic because of the belief system and the bias and what was imposed on me. I believed because of what the teachers believed. I was broken, brain damaged. And fortunately, I had amazing parents who fought back and said no and did everything they could to support me. And that's the only reason I'm here in front of you today and how I was able to write the book.
So, a lot of us know what dyslexia is, but can you just explain how it comes about and what did you have to do to overcome it?
Sure. So, there's a lot of different theories, and I don't think we fully understand it. It is considered a learning disability, and legally it is. Students with dyslexia fall under the Americans with Disabilities Act. So we do have rights and we are protected for now. However, it's my description of it is that we just learn differently. And I like to say that our first language is not language. We're actually visual learners. And it takes us a little while to learn language because our brains are focused on pictures or images. And learning to read just takes a little bit longer. And it's often perceived as an intellectual disability, and it is not. It's often perceived as laziness. And I am the last person in the world who you would call lazy if you knew me. So, and there's many theories out there. Like I said, we don't understand the human brain, so we really don't know. It's a learning difference is what I would say. I had to learn at a very young age how to function in a classroom that wasn't designed for me. And, when you're in elementary school, so much is, about memorization. Memorize your spelling words, your times tables, and all of those things. And that's really difficult for me. My short-term memory is terrible. My long-term memory is excellent. So one of the ways that I worked around that was through repetition, and I had to commit a lot of things to long-term memory. Now, as I grew up, there's a shift in education as you mature. It becomes more about problem solving and thinking creatively. So once I kind of moved into that age appropriate learning, a lot of my issues just naturally kind of dissolved. So to answer your question, I had to learn, tricks and ways around things. And then as I matured, things got a little bit easier for me because the curriculum changed.
So basically, if you have dyslexia, when you look at a word, from
Mhm.
what I understand, the letters might be not in the proper order.
Mhm. That can happen, and it really depends on the student. I definitely had some of that. It wasn't so bad with words because I could look at a word and see that it was jumbled. Um, where I really struggled with was with numbers, whether it's 34 or 43. So there is definitely a vision component, but it's not something I understand. It's something I've tried to read about and learn about, um, but it's just not understood by the scientific community either. So
Okay.
yeah,
No big shock there.
yeah,
Um,
exactly.
so you were able to work around it, or you realized um, the numbers you were saying might be switched sometimes. So what were your math teachers like? I mean, were they able to work with you on that?
Oh, I was always in special education for math because of that struggle. They were able to work with me. Again, it was a lot of repetition and double, triple, quadruple checking my work. So having extra time was absolutely mission critical for me. And that was one of the accommodations that is often given to a dyslexic student is extra time or untimed tests. So that's very standard.
Yeah, for sure. I was just telling my daughter and friends about how in senior year of high school I took pre-cal, and my teacher was 21 or 22 and I was 18, and how awkward that was.
Wow.
But I have to give him credit because he spent a lot of time with me one-on-one in math, and that's what I need with math.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Is I need plenty of times for questions and one-on-one time.
mm-hmm. And I had tutors, which is something my parents provided for me. Fortunately, they had the resources to do that. I also took, in my senior year, I took algebra at our local community college in addition to my regular schoolwork, and had to get special permission to do that because I hadn't even graduated high school yet. But it was a way of me reinforcing um, those skills,
Mm-hmm.
preparing for college.
Yeah,
And I did.
now they're taking algebra in middle school.
Yes, I know. It's so different now. So yeah, it was a
Yeah.
long time ago. So yeah, it was in the 70s and 80s that I grew up.
Yeah, it's amazing those words that they said about you when you were younger. And to me, it just sounds like casting a spell on someone.
Mm-hmm,
And then it's up to you to either believe that,
mm-hmm.
or like your parents said, no way.
Right,
No way we're going to just accept that's going to be her future.
right. My mother's exact words were, "I refuse to allow you to condemn my daughter."
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I think today, by today's standards, that would not be allowed, because that's really awful to condemn a child at 6 or 7 years old.
Yeah. I could go down the rabbit hole of how wrong that is, but
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
lots of people say lots of things that are careless, in the health world, and doctors are guilty of this.
Mm-hmm.
They'll tell you, you have no other options, or
Mm-hmm.
you're going to die in 3 months, or, and as a holistic healer and an energy healer, I never talk to my clients that way ever.
Yeah.
Because number one, you don't know what's going to happen. And I
Mm-hmm.
do believe miracles happen. And, I choose my words carefully
Yeah.
because I do think they're like spells. That's
Yeah.
why when we write, it's spelling.
That's wonderful. I never made that connection before. That's great.
So when I want to wish the best for my client now, no matter how bad the situation is,
Mhm.
I'm not focusing on that. I'm focusing on where are they in the present right now.
Right. Right.
And I don't make predictions,
Yeah.
which is ironic because, if you use tarot or something, you're accused of making predictions and divination when doctors and all sorts of experts do it all the time, but it's okay for them to do that.
Right. Right. I think where you're heading with this, and I think it kind of fits my situation and also what you're referring to. It's about agency. And it's about having agency for yourself. And you have agency for your clients. And a lot of doctors, I think, in our traditional Western medicine take away that agency.
Yeah, it's also called creating a safe space
Mm-hmm.
for your client, or if you were a doctor, for your patient.
Yeah.
Yeah. And do you think that healing is conducive to, negative um, words and negative predictions of what's going to happen to you?
Right.
Yeah, it's all a little nutty.
Yes, it is. It's a little backwards.
Yeah, and so that's why I have this podcast to talk about holistic healing, because holistic healers understand this concept
Right.
very well.
That's something I've learned a lot about on my healing journey. And it's something that I focus on now is, where is my energy? What is my thought process? What am I thinking about? Because what I'm thinking about creates energy, right? And
Mhm.
you know much better than I do. So I've really integrated that into my healing and now my growth and transformation process, because it's really moved from healing into thriving and growth.
Mhm.
Yeah. I do a ton of meditation. I do a ton of breath work and yoga, and those are daily practices for me.
Yeah, and even if you've been doing that for, I've been meditating for 15 years, I can still improve on my thought process and managing my worries and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
No one's perfect, so it's a practice over time.
Yeah.
But do I go down that track where worst case scenario? Oh, I don't ever do that anymore.
I don't think it does any good.
It doesn't. It's a waste of energy
Mm-hmm.
because worry never makes it better.
Yeah, that's true.
Never.
Right.
And we're all a bunch of little worry warts running around worrying about things and blocking ourselves from, gifts and what we really want.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. One of the things I've been focusing on recently is just being really open and not having expectations, and being open in a positive, energetic way, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And just seeing what the universe sends. And sometimes it's pretty surprising.
Yeah, you can say, okay, universe, I want, I will have this. See, you don't even want to say I want.
Mm-hmm.
I will have this, and then or surprise me with something better.
Right. Right. I had an interesting experience this weekend. I had an old friend of mine, somebody I've known for 25 years, who was visiting Colorado, and she just posted something on Facebook saying, "Oh, I'm going to go do a ski trip in Breckenridge." I mean, it was just like, "Oh my gosh!" And I responded, "I'm pretty much there on every weekend if you'd like to get together." So we got together. We actually skied Keystone, not Breckenridge, but we reconnected. We hadn't seen each other in at least 20 years, at least 10 years. And we had such a wonderful time just reconnecting. And then we were on the phone with other mutual friends, sending pictures of ourselves. And one of our friends called. And I think that just naturally happened because I was just open to it. I wasn't open to that specific event, but that was one of the results that I got, if that makes sense.
Oh my God, I love that. And the synchronicity is so magical and fun. So a couple of years ago, I went to Kauai with my husband, and my Reiki teacher, who happens to be up in Virginia, was posting she was going to Kauai too.
Oh my gosh.
And we were there at the same time.
Wow.
I had not seen her in years, years. And we got together and had dinner. And of course, she's very spiritual like me. And I said, she's like, Hawaii was just pulling me toward her. So I just kept thinking about it. And I decided to book the trip. And I said, me too.
Wow. That's amazing.
So your book is also about experience in your marriage and some abuse. So do you want to go into that and share that with us?
Sure. So, despite my parents' absolute unwavering support, I was traumatized by the education system. I was also bullied as a first and second grader. And that label of being brain damaged and disabled and less than was really imposed on me, and it destroyed my self-esteem. So I was carrying this all around and didn't realize it. And that made me very vulnerable to predators and narcissists. And surprise, surprise, I ended up married to a narcissist. I was married for 6 years, tried everything to make it work, and then finally figured out it was never going to work. We had an incident of violence, and hindsight being, I can see there was psychological abuse nearly every day. I mean, I was a psychological chew toy to him. So I had to plan and execute an escape. Prior to that, I'll back up a little bit. I had talked to an attorney who really woke me up and made me realize that I was in danger and I needed to get out. And I got out safely and then reached my surrender point. And I was so traumatized, I was driving through stop signs and red lights. I couldn't function. And I knew I needed help. And I went to work with coaches and therapists and sought out alternative energy work, such as Reiki, acupuncture, learned about meditation, breath work, and all of those things. And all of those things combined really took me on this healing journey. And it has been wonderful. And it took time. It took a good 10 years. And the last half of my book really chronicles that and gives a roadmap as to what I did and how it worked for me to try and give a roadmap for other people.
So how far into the relationship did you realize he was a narcissist?
I didn't understand what was happening to me. I just knew something was wrong and I didn't understand what it was. It wasn't until I got out and started working with therapists that they helped me to understand what was happening.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, I was out and in the process of getting divorced. So, I had to, it was a lot of realizations at that point. The other thing that I think is really important was that to point out is that I was completely committed to my healing journey. I knew I had to take a long, hard look at myself and understand why I was in that situation. Because if I didn't do something, I might end up in that situation again.
Mm-hmm.
And I might not survive it the second time because I almost didn't survive it. And I wasn't willing to live that way anymore. So I was willing to do whatever it took And I was willing to explore energy healing, acupuncture, Reiki, breath work, in addition to traditional therapy, working with an EMDR specialist, and then working with life coaches. So I did all of those things.
And so probably one of the things that you worked on is your self-esteem and building up your self-esteem. And so in what ways were you able to do that? What worked for you?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So the first life coach I worked with, just an amazing man, he was so interesting. I had earned a college degree, I had earned a master's degree, and done all different kinds of adventurous things, scuba diving, ski instructing, skiing all over the world. And I could never, despite all those things, I didn't have high self-esteem. And he said to me, I'm kind of intimidated working with you. You're just so amazing. And I was like, wait, what? What? I said, no. You don't understand. I'm dyslexic. I'm brain damaged. My brain is disabled. And it must have been the right time for me to hear it, because he said to me, Ellen, that is the biggest bunch of BS I have ever heard, and you have been gaslighted into believing that. And I was stunned. And the quote that's often attributed to Buddha, when the student is ready, the teacher arrives.
Yes.
I think that was one of those moments. And it was at that point that he and I, moving forward, started to deconstruct that identity that was imposed on me.
Mm-hmm.
And when we deconstructed that, all of a sudden that was kind of removed from my psyche, from my being. I felt it coming out of my cells. And then I started to ask the question, well, if I'm not that, well, then who am I? And then I had to discover who Ellen really is, and realize that, yeah, she's pretty impressive. She's a pretty awesome woman. And that's, for me, how the self-esteem became apparent. And I was able to really see myself for who I am authentically, not for who I was told I was. And that's the big difference.
And also to see yourself in the eyes of others, because your professor thought you were this amazing person with all this confidence.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a lot of it's like reworking what you're telling yourself.
A lot of it is, yeah.
And what you have been told about yourself that is not accurate or correct.
Yeah. My coach used to call it the blueprint that was imposed on us.
I would call it a spell.
Yeah.
I would call it a black magic spell. And where I get that from is this book called The 4 Agreements.
Oh, yes, I am familiar with it.
By Don Miguel Ruiz. And one of the 4 agreements is be impeccable with your word.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And how you choose to speak to others and to yourself. Yes. And if you choose to gossip, which is one of the worst things you can do, that is black magic. That's what he calls it in the book.
That is fantastic. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I love that you were able to overcome that, and you were able to build up your self-esteem. And once you do that, you're not vulnerable to those types of people like narcissists anymore.
Exactly. And, what's interesting is at some point, the healing journey transmutes, and I love the word transmutes, into a self-discovery and self-development process. I mean, there's still healing that happens. I don't think that ever really goes away, because we're like energetic, emotional onions. There's always another layer.
Right. There's another layer. We keep peeling it off.
Exactly. And it's been so interesting, and as I've progressed through this transformation, I've continuously sought out new coaches, new adventures, new things and ways to learn and to challenge myself. And every time I put myself out there, I get a reward. It may not be the reward that I expect to get, but there's always a positive that comes out of it. And that has propelled me forward to create the life that I wanted to create for myself on my terms. And I know you and I talked about this, but I live in Colorado, and I live here because I love to ski and I love the mountains. This is the lifestyle that I wanted. And through this process, I was able to create that.
Yeah, and there's a phrase that keeps coming up in, in these podcast interviews, how spirit universe works, they keep repeating things, and it's the phrase never give up.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you never gave up. You kept fighting back, and you kept trying things until you found something or a group of modalities that will help you.
Exactly.
And that's what we need to do.
Yes.
Yeah. And then with the healing journey, it never ends. Well, sometimes you think you've healed it, and then something will pop up again.
Oh, yes.
And then you have to address it yet again.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. And I think the key is to be able to recognize that. Because unless you've kind of progressed through that growth process, you might not see it. It may not be in your awareness. And then once it is, you can, like you said, you can then adjust like, oh, maybe I should pay attention to that.
So you tried a lot of different modalities. Can you speak to how, for example, acupuncture specifically helped you?
I think the acupuncture really addressed blocked energy and helped release it. And correct me if I'm wrong, but Reiki works on a similar level.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing I loved about acupuncture is it's an ancient modality. It's been around for a really long time. And if it didn't work, it wouldn't be around. Mm-hmm. But I think that was it, really helping to move block energy and to help the physical healing. Because one of the things I think that a lot of people don't understand is that when you're traumatized, it's not just an emotional reaction. I believe, and I would defer to the experts, but it gets into your cells, it gets into your body, it gets into your organs. And when we heal ourselves emotionally, we also have to heal physically. And I think that's where acupuncture and Reiki can really be effective. I remember I had a moment that I wrote about in my book, and I was doing a deep meditation, and I was laying on my bed, and I was really relaxed and feeling well. And I felt like a ghost got up, like my ghost kind of left my body. It like sat up and walked across the room and left. And I think that was a lot of negative energy. It was very strange, and it was not frightening. It felt healing and positive, but I felt like a lot of negativity just got up and walked out the door, as crazy as that may sound. But that was my experience.
That's not crazy to me. So one of the things that I often like to say, oh, you could get crazy. You could never get crazy enough for me. But so one of the things I like to do when I'm working on someone on their energy field is I always request that if there's any energies around this person that's not for their highest good, you must leave now.
Yeah.
And because I'm clairvoyant, I can see things leave the body.
Right.
Usually it's just like a formless energy or a darker type of color of energy, and it'll come out of a certain section of the body.
Right.
And to me, I don't care where it came from or what it was, as long as it doesn't return.
Right.
Yeah. And usually we can correlate not always that person had a physical issue around that area.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So yes.
Yeah, or an illness in that part of the body, if I
Mm-hmm.
understand you correctly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that I did that was incredibly effective was I joined a CrossFit gym. And very early on in my process. And one of the things I noticed, or I can see now looking back, hindsight's always 2020, is that when I was carrying around so much trauma, I felt very disconnected from myself physically. And when I went into CrossFit and started doing some of these intense workouts, I felt like I got reconnected to my physicality. And that was also a piece of it. So it's a combination in my mind. It's a combination of acupuncture, Reiki, the meditation, the physical training. All these things support each other. And
yeah,
in the
the
healing.
beauty of exercise is it's grounding.
Exactly.
So if you are feeling like not in your body or not connected to your body, or even overwhelmed by your mental body,
Yeah,
exercise can get you out of that.
absolutely. And a big component of CrossFit, I don't know how familiar you are with that, is Olympic lifting. And there's some pretty heavy lifts with Olympic lifting equipment, with the bars, with the big weights. It's always scaled to somebody's fitness level and what's appropriate for their health and well-being. But there's something really empowering about holding a barbell over your head with 20, 30, 40 pounds and just letting that barbell slam on the ground when you dump it. When you complete the move, I should say. Yeah. So yeah.
It's funny you brought that up, because today I took my daughter and her friend shopping. I literally dropped like 3 things in 2 different stores. And I was like, what am I doing right now?
Why is this happening?
I'm not sure. I've been looking to the deep symbolic meaning of dropping things.
Sure.
But maybe it's ungroundedness.
Yeah, it could be. It could be, yeah. So
your book, Disempowered, where is that available? Where can people get a copy?
sure. So it's on Amazon. It's on barnesandnoble.com. All you have to do is Google my name or Disempowered. It'll come right up. And then it's also on Audible. I did the audiobook. I am not the narrator. I had a professional narrator. But a lot of people who are dyslexic struggle to read. So I wanted to make sure that I put an audiobook out for those people who are just more comfortable listening.
And so do you have a website where people can find you or contact you?
Sure. It's pretty easy to find. So I'm ellenbusch.com. But do note that Busch is Busch, like the beer, not the president. Family joke. And I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram, ebush1500, and of course, Facebook. So I'm pretty easy to find. And I welcome people reaching out to me. I'm also a coach. So, and I talk a lot with parents who have children who are dyslexic, helping them to understand what their child is going through.
Yeah. So some final words about someone who might have a learning disability, or someone who might find themselves in a toxic relationship. What would be your advice, the first step for them?
Well, if you're in a toxic relationship, you need to get out. And there are resources to help, national resources, national hotlines, state hotlines. So do a little research carefully. But to somebody who is coping with a learning disability, or the label of the learning disability, we don't understand the brain. Stand up for yourself and fight back. Even though you may have a deficit that you're dealing with, you're going to find that you have talents that other people don't have. And you just have to find those. And when you find them, run with them. Like running towards the end zone with a football. Because that's going to be that's going to be your salvation in a way, and the world needs unique talents. We need unique thinkers, creative thinkers, people who think outside the box. And don't ever, ever, ever give up on yourself, because you're worth it.
I agree 100%. And thank you so much, Ellen, for coming on the show and sharing your experiences with us. Make sure you get a copy of her book, Disempowered. And if you'd like to connect with her, all of her information will be in the show notes.
Thank you so much for having me as a guest.